Welcome to
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Mile High Hockey Lab. Welcome to
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Hello, welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab podcast, hosted by Mile High Hockey, presented by Mile High Hockey, I guess, or featuring Mile High Hockey. All of those things are true. I am your host, Ezra Carter, joined by a bunch of other writers from our staff. All our favorites are here. Everyone who's not here is not a favorite. They just haven't been on the podcast before. As I said, joined by a bunch of folks. Let's introduce ourselves, everybody. I'll start with you, Evan.
Sup, managing editor. Woo woo. I don't know.
That's
That was great.
That's exactly what I was picturing when I
Yeah.
said start with Evan.
That was great.
Jacob, your sound effect and title, please.
Yeah, just gotta calibrate the sounds to the names, right? So yeah, I'm Jacob. I'm a writer here at MHH.
Whoop 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 whoop. And Jackie.
Hello. You all know who I am.
Yeah, that's
I need no introduction.
Yeah.
That's
No
right.
introduction needed.
That's right.
And our producer as well, Adrian.
Hootie hoo, what up?
Hootie. Who? Now, it's been a while since we've all been on the pod together. I know we have a lot of Avalanche stuff to get to. We're going to talk about Cale Makar. We're going to talk about other injury news. We're going to talk about the deadline, and we're going to talk about some potential trade targets, and we're even going to talk about Martin Kaut again, even though he's not an Av anymore. But before we do, I mean, is everybody doing okay? We haven't had an Avs game in a couple days. Who's going through withdrawals?
Me.
Yeah,
It's nice to have
yeah.
one day off, but after that,
No.
it's like, come on.
What am I supposed to do at night? Watch TV? Like, what is it?
Right.
I've been watching them the day after on just like the next morning, and now my mornings are like slow, and I'm actually doing my day job. It's weird. I don't like it. But yeah, I guess let's get right into it. So Cale Makar is concussed, and he was concussed, and then he played, and then he was concussed again. Do you think that the organization mishandled the situation, or do we not know enough to make that determination? Evan, I'll start with you.
I don't think they mishandled it. It's more so just a really inconvenient. I feel like I think actually, first off, I have bad things to say about Jeff Carter that I wish I could share here, but I cannot. Because that's where this kind of all originated, right? So obviously Makar is able to finish out, both the Pittsburgh game and also the Blues game. And, the Blues game that Torpachenko, I guess kind of punched to the face, I guess, was more inadvertent than, Carter just going through the head of Makar, right? So that one I'm not as upset about. It's more so just like the storyline continues, right? Like it's just unfortunately just kind of how it all goes out. And I think personally, like if Makar was feeling good and was feeling fine and he passed concussion protocol, then I don't see why you don't play him, right? I mean, if he felt that way, then he felt that way and good enough to return against the Blues. But even then, it's just like it's just a disappointment, and I think that's really the best way I can say it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I mean he clears protocol, he comes back into the game, that makes total sense, and then a couple days later he's or the next day he's feeling bad, he sits out a couple more days, comes back after clearing the protocol again, and gets hit again, and doesn't even go into the concussion protocol on the Toropchenko hit. It was just he thought his nose was hurting, so he went to the room to get that checked out because it was bleeding, but it does seem like. I don't know what the solution is, because you can't really say like, okay, a guy has a concussion, well then he has to sit at least 5 days. Like that doesn't work.
That's the thing too with concussions, is that sometimes they don't hit you right away. And
which was the case.
I'll speak from personal experience because I've had 3 concussions and they're not fun, let me tell you. But like the first concussion I got, I was during a soccer game. I got kicked in the face with a ball. It was no fun.
Ooh, yikes.
And the first symptom, I finished out the game. I was fine. I didn't start feeling bad until that car drive home. And that was, I don't know, probably about an hour after the game had ended, something like that. So could have been the same for Cale. Like it could have been overnight, right? And then there's other times where it might hit you instantly, right? I mean, that was my second concussion. I actually got kicked in the face instead of a ball to the face. And like, as soon as I was kicked, I immediately felt dizzy and I immediately felt foggy. Like it just very much depends, right? Like it's not like it's not a one size fits all for concussions. So at least it sounds like in this case for Makar that like, he felt fine after like sitting in the quiet room, maybe took, 5-10 minutes to sit in the quiet room, felt okay, was given, I guess, the pass to keep going and keep playing. But that doesn't mean you're never not going to feel symptoms again, maybe later that night or or the next morning that Makar had, right? So it all just depends. Like there's not, it's not really something the Avs could have controlled, and it's just the nature of head injuries in sport as a whole. So there's not really any blame that you can put anywhere except for Jeff Carter. But it's just like it's just a disappointment. That's all.
Yeah, and I wonder too though, like speaking with experience with concussions too, Evan. Like I know, like back in the day, the tests were pretty like, I don't know, not very involved and probably not very thorough. I imagine that is not the case in a professional organization. So it's like, if we're willing to trust this organization with like decisions that involve, young men, I think that trust is something that they've earned. Look at how they handled the Bowen Byram situation. Other teams might have pressured him back sooner, maybe given him less of a leash in terms of coming back and then, going back into injured reserve and stuff like that. So I don't think, like you said, Evan, that it's like as big of a deal as people are leading on. A lot of people are upset and say, like, how do you let the best defender in the world get 2 concussions in 11 days? Well, that's the nature of a head injury, is the mystery of it. And that's why it is taken, very seriously now in the league and in basically every professional league right now. So.
Yeah, this isn't like a Tua Tagovailoa coming back in and looking obviously concussed while he's playing. This is somebody who was fine, cleared protocol, and came back to play.
Yeah,
NHL handles it differently than
I'd say for me, the only sure, a lot of it is hindsight, because you look at like Lehkonen, and he went through the protocol. He came back after a week and he's been fine. So I don't have any problem with him, how they handled it the first time it happened, the protocol he went through. Like, I think he could have come back the Minnesota game if you go by like the time he was required to have off. And Kale's always been a lot more cautious with himself than other players. I think you look at certain players clearly push themselves. Like I would count Gerard as one of them, who always seems to come back sooner than anticipated. Like Makara has always been a little bit more cautious and took time. I remember a couple years ago, it just seemed like it went on and on and on. It was like, he's almost coming back, but no, not quite. So I think he is pretty cautious with himself, and we'll see how that plays out with his latest return, which he's already back on the ice. But I do feel like this might take longer than people expect. Like, I know there's a lot, is it too early? Should he not be on the ice? That, like, there's no problem with him being on the ice, because like I've read a lot of new research and it says sitting around is not considered helpful anymore. Right. It's doing activity and managing your symptoms through that seems to be more the protocol. So I'm fine with that. It's a matter of when he's actually going to play, and I think that might take longer than people anticipate. But the only problem I have is him playing again in that St. Louis game, because it was the third period. They already had the lead. Like, that game was over. Yeah. And that was his first game back too, right? So like, he hadn't even gone through a full game and recovery after the game. So even though they said it was all about his nose and nobody suspected his head, I mean, I don't really buy that. It's just such an excuse. It gave them an excuse when they were like, we weren't even thinking it was a head injury because he wasn't pulled by the concussion spotter. But then he didn't go through protocol and sit in the quiet room because there wouldn't have been time. The game would have been over. Right. So, and they were going by how he said. He felt good enough. Like, he's been a guy, like I said, that's been very cautious about his returns in the past. But there was no need for him to take 3 shifts to finish out that game. Especially when I looked it up. It was 3 shifts. Yeah. It just, to me, that was a little silly. But I also don't think that's why he woke up not feeling good. I don't think it's because he played 3 shifts. And now he has to sit out longer because of it. Yeah, and like to double down on that too, Jack, it's like there was nothing to be won, and he already had a delayed reaction to a concussion in the first circumstance. So you almost would have thought that they would have been like, well, it's his nose, but for now, who knows? In the next couple hours, maybe we should just let him go. We have another break, yada yada yada. So I agree with you on that, Jackie. Like that. I think people are right to question that decision for sure.
Yeah, it's a little strange to say, oh no, we just thought he got popped in the nose, but no, there's no head injury there. It's like, where do you think his nose is?
And also, like, the idea that nobody considered, like, this guy who just had a concussion is back for 1 game, got hit in the head. There's no head injury to worry about. Like the concept there doesn't track at all.
Exactly.
Whether
Well,
it's
just
true
the
or not,
reaction he had too. Like he was just very much like, "Whoa," and you just like I don't think the contact was that extreme for that reaction. So, like to me, I felt like when he reacted that way, it was like, "Oh, that kind of like bothered him."
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So,
why didn't the concussion spotter pull him? That's the real question.
that too.
I feel like we can ask that question once a week.
Right.
Yeah, true. We started this talking about how the NHL handles concussions well, and we're already immediately at how is the concussion spotter handled. Which that's what's so complicated about the whole thing is that from an audience perspective, we can't tell what's right. We can't.
We don't.
And it seems like the medical professional side of it, they can't really either because it's
well, everyone's different. That's the problem with concussions is there's no like one standardized way to like really say this is how everyone has to go. Because like you saw with the Lehkonen, stuff, he was good to go in a week, but with Makar, it's lingering, and you just don't know. This is still very an unfolding science that we're still learning more and more about every day.
Exactly. So hopefully he recovers quickly, and it's not anything that we have to talk about too often for too much longer. But what do y'all think? Should teams be required to be more transparent regarding injuries, head injuries specifically, but any injury?
I would love it. It's just silly having to play these games, and then all people end up doing is guessing and speculating. And I don't really think that does anybody any good. I don't think it does the team or the player. Like, they didn't even admit Byram had a concussion his whole entire first year.
Right.
Like he had to have put an article in the Athletic and actually admitted it himself before they even acknowledged what it was. I just think it's silly. It seems like it's just insulting everyone's intelligence. I mean, I understand like the players have right to privacy and certain things. Like they don't have to divulge every little nitty gritty detail, but it just feels so silly. I hate the way that it is hockey culture, and then the Avs take it one step further. It's just like, this is ridiculous. Come on, let's just be honest. Like when Landy had another setback, just be honest. Like what does it help? And then everyone's like, what's happening? Where is he? Like, this is the timeline. This is the week he's supposed to be back. I just don't think that's better for anybody to have to go through that. Just say like, this is the real timeline. This is the update. And then the same thing, like they spend half of Bednar's press conference going through it, and I'm sure he gets annoyed with it too. Yeah. But if somebody was just gave a clear, concise injury update once a week, that would probably cut out like 80% of the questioning.
Yep.
And definitely. So yeah, I hate it. I definitely think there should be some sort of rules in place, at least for certain, like I said, like a once weekly honest injury update, and then everyone can move on.
Well, and like if you gamble, not saying I do, not saying I don't, but if you gamble on sports too, like that's a pretty influential thing. Like one of my buddies, he was super pumped. He's like, "Oh, I have Cale Makar to score first tonight." I'm like, "He's not playing." So you hope and what happens in that scenario is his bet was just void. And so he just had his money lingering in that transaction until the game was over so that the bet itself could void. So, I mean, there's even some legality in that. Like we're talking about a betting agency holding on to, say, $20 of somebody else's money for 3 to 4 hours when it's not a viable transaction. So I feel like there's a ton of levels to why they should be more transparent. One, it shields them from criticism, aka this Cale Makar situation. If they were more transparent with his initial concussion, then we would have, I think we would have been able to lay out the timeline of what happened and why, and people wouldn't have as many questions. But it's that lack of communication where people kind of don't give them the benefit of the doubt and just think that they're a win-hungry franchise and that they're willing to do whatever it takes. And I just don't think that's the case. So I think it would just help. And like you said, Jackie, the Bednar stuff, like you said, he's probably so sick of being asked every single week, where's Gabe Landeskog at? How's Gabe Landeskog doing? So I don't know. What do you think of that, Evan?
Well, I mean, we've all been asking that question. I'm sure Bednar has also been asking that question himself, and that's probably why he's been getting frustrated with it. So I mean, the nice thing is that he's at least started skating on Monday, skated again today. At least today he looked as though he's doing a little more work. Like not he wasn't just going out for a stroll like he was on Monday. It kind of
Yeah.
seemed like little more work today, and I saw him shooting some at the end. He was out there for a little bit longer. So you can only hope that he's going to return soon, and then Gabe, and then not Gabe, but then that Bednar won't get those questions.
Yeah.
And I know that I posed it yesterday in our piece about Landeskog coming back, is that like we've been through this already twice already this season of like he's coming back, this recovery is going to happen. Oh wait, no, he had a setback. All right, we'll be back in January. Oh wait, no, oh, another setback. All right,
Yeah.
he'll be back in February. Oh no, now we don't know, and now it's been rumored mid-March. I know that was the last thing that I saw, but we just don't really know right now, and that's kind of the beauty of all of this. And to kind of tie it all back together, it's funny because I remember seeing on Twitter earlier this week about somebody was trashing Sports Center Twitter because of course they follow basketball and do all of that, but it was also like Lonzo Ball is like out with like this huge like dynamic situation, da 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 da. And it was like a really long tweet about like basically he's just tired and he can't play. And it's just like where is that descriptor
Yeah.
for hockey injuries,
Doesn't
right?
happen, right.
Like
It was
it
heavy
doesn't
legs.
happen.
That was like my husband's favorite thing when like Tulowitzki couldn't play like 20 years ago. It was like because he had heavy legs, so he always uses that one now. He's like, "Oh, does McKinnon have heavy legs?" I'm like, "Just stop."
That's awesome. Well, like I noticed, like you said, Evan, like Landeskog is taking it easy. Ezra, do you think he comes back before the playoffs, in the middle of the rounds of the playoffs, or like right when the playoffs start? What do you think?
I mean, first of all, obviously, I don't have any information
Right.
as to what he's going to do, but I do think with him skating now, that's a much more promising outlook than the previous ones that Evan mentioned, where we had setbacks when we were expecting him back sooner. Now that he's actually on the ice in Denver, and I was hearing speculation that he was on the ice in his other rehab stints, just not in Denver.
Mhm.
So he's been skating, and he is skating now. Um, I think that's a promising sign. I imagine the team wants to get him back in action before the playoffs actually start, just to get him up to speed. Because
Yeah.
missing a whole season, it's not easy to jump in the middle of it, even in regular season games. To jump in the playoffs, I mean, we're not gonna. He's not gonna be 35 goal Gabe Landeskog right away, 40 goal Gabe Landeskog right away. He's going to be a third line player probably to start, and if he works his way back up to the top, that's great. But I would expect to see him work himself back in slowly, probably in some April games. That's my guess.
Okay. Yeah, that's to me. I feel like that's a reasonable timeline. I want him back, like you said, before the playoffs for the same reason, especially because he plays that position, like where he's constantly in front of the goalie, just getting hacked on. And I think like that's a calloused experience. Like it's not something you can just like immediately get used to. You're gonna have to kind of wear some of those before the playoffs, and they come in their harshest form when playoff hockey rolls around. So I agree. I agree with that completely.
Yeah, Jacob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they have to bring him back before the playoffs, particularly because you look at it like if this had happened last year, that opening series against Nashville, that's a way that you could have eased him back into the lineup. That's
Yeah.
not they weren't a serious threat. They didn't need Landeskog to win that series, but like if they right now they might face like the Wild in the first round, and that could be a real grueling playoff series, and that's not the environment that you need Landeskog to ramp up in, and so the end of their schedule, I've written about this before, it's filled with cupcakes. And I kind of think that they've always looked at the back end of the schedule against the San Jose's and the Arizonas and the Montreals, saying that like these are the games where we want to get Gabe in against a bunch of young players, or teams that are tanking, that are starting beer league guys trying to get Connor Bedard, and that's how we're going to ease Landeskog back into it, as opposed to tossing him into the fire against like Tampa Bay 2 times in a week in this last stretch. So I'm not too concerned, with how this has unfolded. It's, the initial reports after the surgery was sometime between January and February. So right now we're looking at essentially kind of a month longer than we had initially anticipated, which I don't think is necessarily the end of the world. Particularly for a guy like Landeskog, he has such a greasy game that I think that as soon as he kind of gets back up to speed, it'll be a lot easier for him to get back into it, as opposed to a high skilled player like McKinnon, who might take a week or so to really get his hands back in shape.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Jackie,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that's a good point. I really don't think that they want him to start like right away in the playoffs. And I think last year that wasn't even the plan. I think they had hoped that he could have played in those last maybe like 2 weeks, and then he didn't. And so, right, like this year's playoffs could be a little bit more challenging, and he's been out like basically a year. Like this whole problem started like pretty much a year ago at this point. So, I do think they ideally want him to play and to get reacclimated, and the schedule is a good point. Like if you're playing teams that maybe aren't trying to win, or with a lot of inexperienced players in those rosters, it could be easier environment for him, which is also why I don't think they wanted to do like the LTIR thing with him, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But so I think it all fits. My thing is like, even if he doesn't feel 100% awesome, I think he's going to try anyway, because if you're not coming back now, you're not coming back. So I think he's going to maybe push through anything, because there have been so many starts and stops and setbacks. I think he's just going to go for it. And my concern still is kind of like the long term. Like, is this really behind him now after all of this? How is he going to feel after he plays for a certain length of time? So I do feel confident that he will play, but we'll just have to see how he looks, how long he can play for, all of that.
Definitely, this missing a whole year in your 30s screams problem. But
yes,
we'll see. Evan, anything you want to add to this part of the discussion?
No, I mean, I think generally speaking, it's the wanting to come back, and maybe rushing back is also just a part of hockey culture, just generally speaking, because you think about that kind of all the time. As you saw it with Landeskog during the playoffs last year, didn't take any morning skates, didn't take any practices, but was always there for the game, pushing through it, just sticking to hockey culture. And that in itself can be like a bigger discussion that maybe you could have another time, but like, that's just kind of what it is. And I think Jackie kind of leads us into a good point with LTIR stuff and how it all just kind of connects to everything. So
I did want to ask one quick before we completely move on from Landy. One quick question I probably should have already asked, but do you think that he will or should have like a conditioning stint with the Eagles before he comes back?
That's interesting.
I do not think so, but it is a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it does happen. Like, it's not completely unrealistic, especially for players that have missed a lot of time, and to do something short, like, even just a weekend, especially when he hasn't played. And I know that the Avs just love to put their regulars back in because their regulars, even at like 80% and rusty, are better than the guys that would replace them. But I think in his, like, Byram had the conditioning stint last year, and part of it's because he's still a young guy, but I think it was also they needed to get him kind of up to like NHL speed, and I think Landy could be a good candidate for that.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Byram point because I know he did that last year. I think you would know the answer to this question, Jackie. Would there be any would he have to pass waivers? How would that work?
No, every team's allowed to do that. So he would still be on the cap. He's still like on the roster, so he doesn't like leave. So no, you don't have to like waive him to get him down. It's obviously limited. I think it's limited to like 2 weeks or 5 games, something like that. So, and then I think you can ask for an extension because the circumstances are extenuating. I think you could get like another week or something, but it's definitely limited. So, so 1 or 2 weekends is not a problem, and he would be technically on the Avs roster while it's happening.
It would definitely be interesting. I'm just trying to imagine Landeskog in an Eagles jersey right now, and it's
The coolest thing I've
quite
ever
funny.
heard.
I know it would sell out
That fan
Budweiser.
Oh
base
my
would lose their
goodness.
minds.
Oh yeah,
It would be the
I
highest selling like week of Eagles history.
I know.
Yeah,
That's what I'm. That's
absolutely.
if that happens, like, because I'm in and around the area right now, I would so go. Like, that'd be awesome to
Yeah.
see
That's
that
jack
and just
up
see the
ticket
energy
prices.
in that building.
Well, it's like
Oh, the ticket prices.
yeah, I
Don't-
don't yeah, I don't know if you guys remember though, like when the not to get too far off topic, but when the Rockies had an a triple A or double A affiliate in Colorado Springs called the Sky Sox, a lot of the time guys just like this, big name guys coming back from injuries who just needed to take a lot of hacks would play for the Sky Sox in Springs. I think even like Troy Tulowitzki at one point, Matt Holliday at one point played for the Sky Sox. So like that would be epic to go up to Vail and see the Avalanche captain, probably captain the Eagles for a night or a few nights. That would be so cool.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
I don't
that'd
think
be
he could take
awesome.
Brad Hunt's C though. I mean,
They could give him
I don't
an
know.
A. They could definitely give him an A.
Give him the third no C, give him 3 A's.
It would be.
Yeah.
It would definitely be fun. It would definitely be a lot of fun, and also because you mentioned Rocky, shout out Purple Row and their SB Nation covering the Rockies. Go give them a follow because we're gonna try and do some things with them to help us survive a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So, shout out to them. But anyway, we're way off topic now. Sorry. Go ahead.
well, let's
Ezra.
get back on topic. It was something we mentioned just briefly right before we derailed. Was the long-term injured reserve situation. Obviously, the Avalanche are dealing with more injuries than just Landeskog and Makar. EJ is Eric Johnson is probably done for the season. He's got a broken ankle. Bednar didn't answer directly that he was done for the season, but basically agreed when asked recently. So and of course Pablo Francouz is also out now for a couple weeks. He will be back before the end of the season, it looks like. But with EJ, do you expect the Avalanche to be using the LTI, putting him on LTIR to use up cap space heading into the deadline? Jacob, we'll start with you.
I mean, really, I think it depends on how the Avs want to approach it. You know, just a quick Google search says that a broken ankle recovery timeline is 6 to 8 weeks, and so that is effectively does put him down for the rest of the regular season. You know, the optimistic take is that maybe he could return for the final week or two of the season, and so I think that's probably what's in the back of the Avs' mind is, do they want to use that 6 million to go or to free up that 6 million to go big game hunting out on the trade market, or if they don't feel like they need to go and get a make a big deal, maybe they do value the potential that, hey, maybe he comes back like a week early and we can ramp him up for the playoffs before then. I think that a lot of it depends on how the Avs look at their team as is. I don't think that the Lent or the EJ injury changes a whole lot as far as their thinking on the trade market. I think it's just a lot more. Is their existing stance, we need to go out and make a splash, and if so, then forget the hope that EJ might come back for a few games, but before the playoffs, stick him on long-term IR, see if maybe he could play in the playoffs. Because if not, England's been doing a pretty good job this year as a fill-in for him in the sixth defensive spot.
Yeah.
I also I agree with you that, like, probably in a perfect world they'd want EJ to play before the playoffs, but it does get into, like, how much is it worth it if it means that you have this $6 million and they have a lot more flexibility in other areas. Like, I think they would have gotten a lot of scrutiny if they try to do Landeskog that way, and it would call into the Kucherov thing and yada yada. But, like, because EJ had played, I think, every game up until that point, and it's obviously, I mean, they're all legitimate injuries, but just nobody is going to question that one. Like, he's going to need so much time to skate to come back, and it's like the Avs don't really play the LTIR games very much in general, but it seems like this would be the situation for them to do it if they ever were going to. And I don't necessarily mean that, like, changes their strategy, because I don't know. I think you kind of have to, like, know which lane you're in to begin with. and I don't really think they can go big game hunting, like who's left anyway, other than Kane. But I think it frees them up because then they don't have to watch every single penny that comes in. Like if they're not going to do LTIR, I don't know if they can add anything. They have like $100,000 cap space. Like they have nothing. So I just and they really have nothing that they can move off of the NHL roster to like money in, money out kind of thing. So I think they're just gonna have to do it if they want anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just kind of where they're at this point. And especially this season, you can't just assume that you're gonna have no injuries and be able to operate outside of LTIR. Like you just can't.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see them use that financial flexibility and maybe take on some bad money or be the broker team and use maybe like 2-3 million that way, because it's a way for them to get assets that they could use now or later, but that's not really how they operate, so we'll see.
Yeah, and just to bounce off of that, Jackie, like typically you don't see the Avs do the whole make a big splash. And I did a live tweet, but I did it before the show today because I figured it'd be better to have a little bit more feedback to kind of react to. And that poll of the week was on our Twitter account, which everybody go check us out. We're at MHH_lab. That's at MHH_lab. I said the trade deadline is fast approaching. If the Avalanche send EJ to the LTIR, how should they proceed? Option number 1, make a splash with a rental. Option number 2, bolster depth with re-signable acquisitions. Option number 3, find another shutdown defender. Option 4, other, and ride in. I'll just bounce it back to you, Ezra, because I don't think you would get to answer otherwise. So what's your answer to this question? And
well,
why?
I actually just went to our Twitter and answered on the poll. I'd say bolster depth with re-signable players, and I think that does. It's interesting the way you phrased it, because I think that kind of covers the acquire shutdown D for me. Like that's the depth that I want to add as a defenseman, and a defenseman and a winger is what I would add, a middle six winger if you can. And I don't really care if they're re-signable, honestly, but I do think that putting EJ on LTIR is necessary to do that, because like Jackie was saying, there's no money without that. The Avs weren't able to accrue cap space leading up to the deadline like they did last year to make all the trades they did last year possible, because they've had to have people on LTIR to make things work during the season with all the injuries that they've had. So there's not much money to work with. EJ has to go to LTIR if they're going to bring in anybody who's got any kind of contract, really. And I think that's the way to go. I think a guy like well, we can get into more details of
yeah, we'll get there
a little bit later in the show, but that's what I'm thinking.
Well, let me give you the results real quick. So
yeah, great.
Out of 304 votes, we had 45% say make a splash with a rental. Seems like the emotional selection. Bolster depth at 33%, acquire shutdown D at 17%, and 5% other. Some of those write-ins were absolutely should try to bring Luke Shen and Nick Bonino in as rentals, help solidify bottom six. Bonino can help with PK. I don't know about the Bonino one.
No.
Middle six forward, you just said that they can keep past this year, and an NHL defenseman so they don't have to play McDermott or Englund in the playoffs. That sounds almost exactly like what you just said, pretty much, yeah?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem playing England, but
me either.
But other than that, yes. I think England had some pretty high-profile mistakes that people are focused on, but and that makes sense. But he's really tamped those down, and I like his play. And listen, this is hard for me to say, but Curtis McDermott has been playing within himself lately, and it's like he's okay.
Yeah.
If he's not headhunting, if he's not like overreaching, he has like one brutal turnover a game, and every time it happens, I'm like, let's get him out of there.
Yeah, like
say it again. Sorry.
Say that turnover in the Tampa game is just burned into my memory.
That one was so bad. And I want to be clear. Like England is the guy I'm okay with. McDermott I do want to, but both of them are like they're doing their jobs lately. I wrote it in the weekly grades recently. I was like ready to say Curtis McDermott deserves some praise this week, and then he had that Tampa turnover. So,
good thing your thumb was just over the button.
Be like, okay, I'm wrong. This guy's okay, and then he was terrible. But yeah, I think England deserves more praise than he's getting recently.
Yeah. I agree. And I don't know, Evan, what do you think of those results? I feel like everybody wants to see, I mean, maybe not everybody, but some want to see a guy like Kane in an Avalanche sweater, but that's like NHL, that's like La La Land stuff, don't you think?
Right.
No,
That's stuff you do in video games.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and that's why I'm with Ezra and in the acquire a depth player probably. Like I said, well, we'll get into that more. I know I just had a piece come out of it earlier this
Yeah, you got
morning
plenty to say.
that I really like. So we'll get into more of that later. But that's where I'll leave it for now. For that, yeah, just get a depth guy. I think that's just really what will help the Avs at least right now in this moment.
And Jackie, does losing EJ exacerbate the need for a depth defender, kind of, in your mind?
Yes and no. I could see to them because they always seem to want to have good defensive depth, at least in quantity. And they know that there's like nothing else on the Eagles. So I mean, not counting Brad Hunt, like they're comfortable bringing him back. But but anybody that had been on the Eagles, let's just say.
Right.
So you've got Brad Hunt, you've got England. You know that they are comfortable using McDermott in some capacity. So is that enough? And I'd say yes. And it's like there's guys out there like Jack Johnson they could bring back, some other, maybe like a Kulikov. And then the question is, how much better are they really? Like, is Jack Johnson that much better than England?
Right.
And they didn't play Jack Johnson much in the playoffs last year. He played like 7-8 minutes a night. Could you get that out of England and still feel comfortable? My answer would be yes. I'm not exactly sure that their answer is yes, but yeah, it just doesn't seem the year that they really need to spend in that direction. It seems like a very likely move that they would make, but it does also feel redundant.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think we've talked a little bit here about the potential of making a big splash, and obviously that's what people responding to our poll wanted. But Evan, let's get into what you wrote a little bit, because I don't really see that there's a lot out there as an option. Obviously, Horvat was a discussion with EJ on our IR. Maybe that would have been possible, but he's gone. O'Reilly's gone. Personally, I'm fine with that. I didn't think either one of them made a lot of sense. Right. But yeah, who did you think? Who did you identify in your piece, Evan?
Yeah, so I mean, I think kind of the first place to start is that we've already kind of touched on it already. Is that assets are thin already with the Avs. It's going to be hard to make trades, and the really main reason why this is coming up, especially now in the first place, is because of EJ going possibly on LTIR,
right,
and missing the rest of the season. Otherwise, I don't think the Avs would be doing much of anything at all, except if it was a straight player swap during this trade deadline. But as you already said, there had been discussions and linkages with Horvat, with O'Reilly, but both of them are now off the board. Jonathan Taza was there for a little bit too, but he's dealing with long COVID stuff, which first off, obviously, get well soon. Health is the most important thing. That really sucks for the Blackhawks captain. So it's been announced that he's not going anywhere. So really that leaves only like the two, I guess, big splash players left for the Avs, and that was Patrick Kane and Sean Monahan. Monahan, he is dealt with injuries all year long. Talking to Habs people, they don't even know when he's coming back from injury. So like, you could even count him off the board right now for all we know. Yeah, and I don't really have interest in that either. And the same kind of goes for Patrick Kane. Like, yeah, it'd be really awesome. It would definitely be really weird to see him in an Avs jersey and not a Blackhawks jersey. And so, I don't see that happening either. I mean, his cap hit to, let me look at my piece. I'm pretty sure it's like 10 and a half or something like that.
Yeah.
Really, really high.
It'd have to be a 3-team trade, basically, because somebody'd have to take on some of that.
Yeah, like Minnesota just did for Toronto.
Well, at least it's prorated. I mean, it depends how much room they had, because at least it's prorated.
True.
So then if you're looking at 5.25 prorated, or if they'd have to retain too. And then with the proration, I think they could make it work. But yeah, it's still like a huge number to fit in, and there could be some shenanigans.
Not to mention, that might be kind of distracting, right? Like, it might,
I do think too. Like
Yeah.
it'd be everything about like, oh, Kane's never played anywhere else, and it would be fun. But yeah, as Evan was describing it would be fun to a point. But then at the other point, it would be like, it's not about him. It's about the abs.
Right.
It's about the guys that have earned the right to carry the day. McKinnon, McCarr, Rantanen, and like we don't need a Patrick Kane.
Yeah. And you actually lead on to my next point really greatly, Jackie, because the guys that I had listed, and like, you know, we've discussed it already in here at least a little bit, are some of the guys that I think the Avs should be looking at to bring in there. So I listed out 5 in the article. I'm going to talk about 4 of them and then talk about a 5th one that is not on this list. So Nick Bukestad from the Coyotes, I think he would be a great fit. 13 goals, 10 assists this year. With Arizona, struggling, of course. People might be interested in him, and I hope the Avs are. His cap hit's only $900K. He's a UFA at the end of this season. Like I'm
it
begging
hits all the boxes.
Chris McFarland. I know, like it hits the boxes.
That
it would be so great.
It's such a repeat of the Nico Sturm move. Just a big body who plays well, who can move, who can add some value. I think he's a better player than Nico Sturm, but I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the hope too, is that he would, turn out a little bit better than Nico Sturm, and then Nico wouldn't be stuck in, I think, San Jose, right?
San
where
Jose,
he's at now. So
he's making good money. Good for him.
Yeah, he got paid.
that's true. What you get when you win the cup? Jackie, you're gonna like this. Ivan Barbashev. I know that you've been a big person to, yelling from the rooftops to bring him over. I will also agree with that. Again, another depth piece. The Blues are selling off. They've already sold off Tarasenko. They've already sold off O'Reilly. Why not get Barbashev?
Question.
His cap's a little bit higher. Yeah.
Will the Blues ever trade inside the division though?
Yeah, they're not going to do the Avs
point.
any favors, but at least like the big names are out. Like at that point,
true.
They're just trying to move their depth guys. Like, are you really gonna
take Barbashev?
Yeah,
I got you.
For a rental, I think they would.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Blues are already done playing the Avs this season. Yeah. So,
good point.
It maybe, but you do bring up a good point about that. His cap hit is a little bit higher. It's $2.25 million, so that would be, you'd have to work around that at least.
That's
a little
still affordable,
more,
I'd say.
It's
I do worry a little
affordable.
bit how he's kind of become the best of what's left over. I think he might. I've heard the Blues want like a second and like a decent prospect for him, which the Avs obviously don't have. Like, sure, they have their 2025 second, but another team out there is going to be able to offer either this or next year draft capital. So they're not going to be in the race if he's really going to fetch second. So I do worry that he's become a tad bit more expensive, but he's not one of those grit, big reputation guys. Let's be honest, some Russians still sometimes can have their maybe not every GM out there is a huge fan of Russians, and so that could limit his market. And so I think he's a guy where if the market doesn't materialize like the Blues are hoping, and he's not one of the first guys on the list and he starts to linger, then I think he'd be a great fit. But if they can really get that second for him, then like there's no way the Avs are going to do it.
Yeah. And so, it all kind of comes back to the same issue of the Avs don't have a lot to give out and make trades, right? Which also actually on that front too, just don't trade away the first round pick.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. It's just not worth it. The rentals aren't worth it. Kane's not worth it. Unless they can get a deal out there, let's say Timo Meyer is probably like the real big fish. Right?
Yeah.
Sure.
But or something, any good young player that they're gonna sign long term. So I wouldn't say it's like untouchable, because you can definitely come up with a scenario, but
Timo Meyer
you're not gonna burn it.
Yeah, Timo Meyer would almost require a first. You'd almost require probably a guy like Newhook,
somebody
or Confer,
else.
and a couple more picks or a prospect too. So like that's probably not in the Avalanche best interest. One of the guys that I put out on, like, I was doing a bunch of mock trades on Cap Friendly just to be a dork, and I did one for Luke Shen. I probably gave too much for him in my Cap Friendly trade. I think I did a second and Shane. So, like, I think you could probably take Shane off altogether and maybe get him just for a second. Luke Shen with Josh Manson would be pretty cool. I think, in terms of like a complete shutdown line. What do you think of that, Ezra?
Well, I think that that's too rich for me. For a second is too much for me. For
So a
Luke Shannon.
third? Would you do a third?
I could get behind a third.
Because
I
that's
think
their
Vancouver's
asking
good.
price. Apparently, is a third. Is what I've heard.
I think they need to keep those if they
They have a
ever
third?
want to do a Lekanen type of Taze type of deal anyway. Like that's the
Yeah.
stuff you need to keep around to even be shopping in that kind of
Right.
aisle. And
well, because
you know,
for Lekanen, it was a second and Baron, right?
right.
Yeah.
So they have the 2025 second and third, and it's like, yes, they could move them this year, but they just would be so devalued. And like that's the only thing they're gonna have to be able to kind of do that RFA shopping in
That's
the
fair.
future.
Yeah.
And so for me, I really don't want to see those picks go unless it's for like that type of deal where they're getting a young player and they're going to be able to keep him. So
Fair enough.
they just have to be so
Agree.
careful with everything right now, I think.
And I just don't see Shen as that big of an upgrade on an England.
Okay.
He is more of a commodity than England, and that's why he's
Sought after.
a popular
Yeah.
ad right now. But I feel like the defense market is broken. Like what we're seeing with like Vlad Gavrikov, and obviously we've seen it in the past couple of deadlines with all these other guys that went for crazy. Ben Sherratt,
Yeah.
the other guy from Columbus who went to Tampa, whose name I'm forgetting right now. I think I want to stay out of that and just go with the depth at defense just in case of an injury, but not anybody who's being talked about because they're going to cost way more than they're worth. It happens every year, and I'd stay way out of that market.
Premium.
Definitely. And we've seen that with Jacob Chitrin, right? He's been out of the lineup now for 2 weeks, supposedly for a trade. It seemed like that he was going to the Kings, and now it's just like nobody knows, right? So, but Jacob Chitrin is not on my list. He's not coming to the Avs. I don't see that.
No.
He's not, but he is somebody who, like,
but-
if for some reason he was coming to the Avs for a reasonable price, I'd be cool with. That's somebody on the defense market that's different. Guys
That's true.
who are third pair guys who are not going to do much, I have no interest in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
fair.
back to more Coyote players. These ones I'll go through quickly. Nick Schmaltz, another Nick on the Coyotes would be really great, but he's under contract until 2026 with a 5.85 million cap hit. That one you'd have to have a whole lot more to get him out of Arizona. Arizona is probably going to want to build around him. I don't think that's going to happen. That's kind of a long shot. Jack Johnson, we've already touched on him a little bit. It would be nice, but I don't think so. And I also agree with you, Ezra. I think England has slotted in well. Throw Brad Hunt into that mix too.
Agreed.
I don't think the defensive depth is something that we should be going for now. It was obviously a concern earlier in the year, but I think England and Hunt have proven themselves to feel like that Bednar could be comfortable enough to fall back on them should needed. Now, if Makar and Taves and Byram, knock on wood, all go down, then maybe you have to do something.
You're
right?
not
Sell the
winning anyway.
franchise.
Exactly.
Yeah, which you have
Uh,
to do. Tank.
Hold on to your
Exactly.
assets and go to next year.
Exactly. So, and then I mentioned Nick Ritchie, but whatever. I just kind of threw that one out there.
Well, you mentioned Richie. What do you think of Henrique? Is he too old and too expensive?
Henrique,
And he also got injured, possibly.
the
That's the big
injury,
problem.
the injury's the concern to me. I didn't really look into Henrique all that much, so I guess I don't have
33-year-old center, 5.5 AAV, and
And he's signed for next year. So I
Yeah.
get the logic. Like he's a
Yeah.
popular suggestion out there. I understand the logic because if you get half retained on him, then he's not a second line center, but you could probably feel comfortable saying he's like third line
yeah,
center.
he's kind of like
probably.
Comfer, like right in between.
And
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 he's
then-
been successful on the wing this year too, which adds versatility.
Yeah, that's true.
and then he's signed for next year. So that's if it was just for like a rental thing, I'd be like, no. But when you're talking about, okay, you could have this guy and he'd be making like 2 point whatever for next year. He's somebody you could slot in. Like they're not getting anybody on the market at that price next year.
Right.
So I see the logic. Like that does feel like something the Avs would be interested in, like some sort of play like that. But then
Yeah.
the question just becomes, then what's the return? Like I'm not interested in doing a first for that. So then you get back into like, okay, well, what are you going to give up for that? For them retaining for this year and next year, you're going to have to give them something. Are the 2025 picks in play for this? If you don't, is there enough for that? And that's kind of the problem I have. Because I'm not comfortable going there for a first. And if you're not, is a deal workable? Maybe, maybe not. So I'm kind of lukewarm on that idea. It's workable, but I'd really want to know how.
Yeah, I'd agree with that sentiment, I think. So, wait and see, I guess. But then the last guy I want to talk about, I know I've been talking for a long time and people probably want me to shut up, so I
No,
will.
please.
It's been
But-
perfect.
I've got one guy after this too.
I was gonna say the last person I want to talk about, and just announced, but just seen today, were Mika Rantanen's comments on Jesse Pugliarvi.
Interesting.
Which would be, I mean, I had the quotes pulled up on my phone here. So according to Rantanen, Pugliarvi would fit in with the team. The friends who won the World Junior Gold together stayed in touch during the season. Miko said, "I've been thinking the exact same thing. I know what a great guy he is. I would welcome him with open arms. It'd be a fresh start for him with a good dressing room and a good support around him. I believe it would definitely work." And if I'm not mistaken, Rantanen also said similar things about Lehkonen before he was
You're
traded here,
100%
right?
correct.
Yeah.
So if Rantanen is saying these things and these good things, and I'm sure these comments are probably going to reach Pugliarvi if I had to guess.
Oh yeah.
Edmonton's all over the place. It's just like they always are. Up
They're
there
in
in
such
Alberta,
a weird
so
spot.
they're in such a weird spot. And Pugliarvi, I know he was held out of the lineup at least a couple of times earlier this season, just because of some rumors or something like that. And I think that would also be a great fit for the Avs if they can find a way to make that work. That would be wonderful. Take away from another Western Conference team, take away from a team that is also in the playoff race with you.
He's
Get
24.
some more depth, some still pretty young.
Yeah.
I think he also checks all the boxes. I don't know exactly what his cap hit is off the top of my head.
It's $3 million.
was gonna say
That's
$3 million.
kind of the problem.
Yeah.
And he has $3 million qualifying.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, it almost checks all the boxes. But if it's pulled off, if Chris McFarland's able to get on the phone and be able to work some sort of deal out with the Oilers, and bring Pugliarvi over, I think that'd be great. I think he'd be a great fit. I don't know what you all think, but maybe after he retires, Rantanen could be a good scout.
Rantanen just wants more fins, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah,
He just wants
exactly.
more fins.
Yeah, I love that. But
I don't think it's ever been in question that he's not like a good guy or whatever. But I mean, sure, if Rantanen vouches that he'd fit in good, I mean that's cool. But like, I figure he'd be kind of positive just about anybody that he knows well. But the Pugliarvi one's tough for me. Like I feel like the deadline is for known quantities. Like teams are getting like guys that PK and take face-offs and have been in the playoffs and have produced in the playoffs, or big names, and you're like buying reputation basically. And right now his reputation is pretty not good. Mm-hmm. So I don't see them, like I could see them signing Pugliarvi if it's like late August and nobody signed him, and take a flyer on him, and then he's like their project for the year. I just don't think that they are going to take on a project right now, especially that cap hit. And then if it works out, then you got to give him a $3 million qualifying offer. And it's like, yeah, but he could sign an extension for less, but then you got to sign him an extension with term and blah, blah, blah. So,
when he already went to arbitration, right? That's how he got the $3 million qualifying offer, if I remember correct.
I don't remember exactly his situation. Maybe because he did go back to Finland, and that was part of the situation too. So I don't know. I mean, he just really doesn't produce much, and I know his fans say it's because of his usage, and we've been down that road, and we have plenty of guys on our team that don't produce. And I think everybody should get a fresh start, because you never know. But it depends. Like, what do you want to pay for a fresh start? Right. You want to pay the $3 million, and they're about to waive him because they're getting so
Yeah.
desperate.
Well,
I think he'd clear waivers. I don't think anybody wants to pay him $3 million.
No.
Is the thing.
I can't imagine he clear waivers, but maybe I do agree with you completely. I think like taking a flyer on him next year makes a ton of sense, and bringing him in right now is a little dicier. I'd love to see him hit waivers. I would make that claim. I think
I think I would too. The thing that worries me about Puljujarvi is that, I've seen some people compare him to Nichushkin, and that, his top 10 pick hasn't really done much offensively. But if you look at, his defensive metrics, he's got some good, good numbers. And so some people think that he could be a similar reclamation project. But, for a team like Edmonton that is just so desperate to find any type of defensive cohesion, like anybody who can just play defense, period, and, guard the leads that, McDavid is able to get for that team, if they're just going to outright release him, like, how much value does he really have? Because a team like Edmonton, I mean, you would figure that, like, hey, if this guy is, a solid bottom six type who can play some decent defense, isn't that a type of guy that Edmonton needs right now? And
but they're so old school. Like if that guy was 33 years old, and they'd be all over it.
That's a good point.
But because he's a failed. If
he didn't wear a shield,
the Edmonton dysfunction into that too.
They're very old school.
Yeah.
Like they want their defensive guys to be like big and old and lead in hits and block shots and all that stuff. Like he's a failed third overall pick, and we see how that goes. Like when you don't meet expectations and you never know. And it's true, he could be another Nuke. He could be another Yakupov. Like there's other ones that haven't made it that were high picks. Leah Sanderson, like Kravitsov is in the same situation. Like these teams don't want to just outright get rid of these guys, but it's like they also really don't have any value either. Well, like their pedigree is their only value. And so they end up getting traded for each other because then it's kind of like, well,
you try.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're kind of getting the same box in return, and so you're just kind of hoping. Like Nuke was basically a miracle. I don't think that's ever happening again.
Yeah, no.
But
it's also the only way to do it because you got him for $850,000 for a year, not $3 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right, exactly. And so I just think, like, I definitely think he's worthy of a fresh start, but I think it's just gonna have to come in that avenue.
Yeah.
The Oilers are just gonna have to suck it up and like release him or whatever, just not sign him because you can only hold on to hope for that for so long. And so like I wouldn't mind trying it. Like sure, it's worth trying it every year, but then you're also doing it at the expense of like guys you're allegedly developing, and they're not gonna get another Nuke. So it's kind of a tough situation.
I don't know. Just a thought. I think if the Avs do any big move, I feel like Puljujarvi might be the biggest one.
I agree with that. I don't think
that'd be the farthest I'd go. That's the farthest I see him go.
The other name I want to throw out there that would be kind of a big move in a similar vein would be Jacob Vrana. Do you guys have any interest in that?
Yeah,
I love his play
That's an interesting one. I would love
the fit
because he's had the issues that he's had, the player assistants. I think they have said it's substance abuse. So we just don't know.
It's rough.
I mean, it really would have to just depend on what his situation is, how he's doing. That's just nothing any of us on the outside could tell. I know that Detroit just called him up and showcasing him, but I see the appeal because he can put the puck in the back of the net. He can play well at 5-on-5, which is what the Avs are desperately needing.
He's kind of the Andre Burakovsky replacement that the team seems like it needs, that depth scoring guy who can just fill up the net when he gets going. I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be expensive, but I think it'd be cool.
Well, was he the 13th overall pick in 2014? So like it's crazy how many first round picks we're talking about today in terms of like being not what they were expected to be, and because of that somehow they're trade targets, right? So that goes to show like what getting drafted high will do for your entire career. And just to kind of segue that, I know Jackie, you have a lot to say about how the Martin Kaut situation ended. He's a high draft pick for the Avalanche that just didn't shake out. It's according to the comments, which I read the entire quote from Martin Kaut, and I think there was some extrapolating done. I don't think he actually said like I asked for a trade in my draft year. Like, that's not the case. He said he asked for a trade 5 different times. We don't know the time frame. Nonetheless, what do you think of his comments, Jackie, and how do you feel about how the situation ended with Kaut?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think those got read in a little bit too much. I don't think there's any way that he asked for a trade after he was drafted. I mean, he agreed to come over and sign a 5-year ELC and play in the AHL. Like he was definitely not against the organization. And he's still working his way through learning English. Like I think he gets taken like very literally in what he says sometimes. Like people love to talk about what he said after training camp about it. Like, this was like his last chance, and it meant that like he was giving up on hockey or just some other just ridiculous things. And it's like he's not trying to say these things. He might just not quite have the words to put things in other ways that maybe some North Americans would. So
agreed.
I think it's just easier to like read into what he's saying. And I watched the interview too, and so it doesn't surprise me to ask for a trade. Actually, wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the Avs prospects asked for a trade. Like, how does Shane Bowers feel?
Yeah, those forwards.
And we know that his counterpart Ryan Merkley had asked for a trade, and it was such a bad situation he actually sat at home over it. So
wow.
I don't think anyone should be throwing stones at Kaut because he asked for trade.
Well, they both. I mean, I feel like also on the other side of that, like the organization can't really be. You can't say like, oh, why didn't they get rid of him sooner? Well, it's like they put him on waivers twice. So, and I know that there's stipulations to his contract that might have swayed people, like he would have had to have played in the NHL right away, but still, he was available twice. And then they finally got him out to a place that both guys needed a change of scenery. So although it took time, I feel like the organization did the right thing by him still.
Yeah, I could see that. But you're right. I mean, once you've cleared waivers, it's a little hard to argue value leverage, there. Yeah. So right, you're looking for like, which is what they found exactly, and happen to be the same draft class, 5 picks away from each other, or whatever it is. So it goes back to that same like pedigree, like for like. Mm-hmm. But as far as him like asking, and then he goes on to say it was because he was playing with defensemen on his line, which is true, and that it's hard on a contender to really break into those higher lines, which is also very true.
He also played a lot with Newhook, though. I think he played the most. He did get his chances.
I mean, it's not like he got no chance. I mean, that is true. He did play with Newhook and Erod, but that line was kind of dysfunctional. Like, there's a reason why Newhook and Erod are not playing together right now.
Yeah.
But true, it's not like he didn't get a chance this year. I think this is the year that you could finally say, like, okay, he did get it, like 30 games, the majority of the season to that point. But they still couldn't make it work. And so I agree with the fresh start and moving him, but I can also see the frustrations. I mean, he really did play with McDonald and McDermott.
Yeah.
As well. And 4 and 5 minutes, a lot of games. And I also wonder if it goes back to when they didn't invite him after his second year, and that was his first call up, and he played so well right before the COVID shutdown, and then they didn't invite him to the Edmonton bubble. Like it wasn't even that, and it's because if he'd played one more game, it would have burned his ELC, and everyone thought that meant they valued him so much, and they were just protecting him, but like they didn't even bring him. Like it's one thing, bring him and then decide, right? Yeah. I mean, they brought Bowers for goodness sake, and they definitely were not going to play him under any circumstances. So, if he got any bad feelings from the organization, I could see it could have been after that, and I think he would have been justified. And they probably should have moved him then if they didn't really think that he was a great fit for Bednar in the system. And he would have had value because he would have been like 20 years old at that point.
Yeah.
But it does seem like Sakic liked him. Like Sakic talked to him personally a lot. So I think Sakic still believed in him, is maybe why they really didn't try to get rid of him at that point. And so, but the Avs tend to hold on to their assets a little too long. And I know it's a dance, right? You don't want to just start throwing away young players like the Chicago Blackhawks do. they throw away like every pick that they've drafted. Right. And it's not getting them anywhere. So I get that it's also like a hindsight thing, but they really got to figure out on these guys. Like if there's no fit, you got to do something before they get waived and then you trade them for other busts,
Yeah.
So that's my thinking of it. But I'm glad that he got the call up. It seems like he's staying in San Jose, at least for now. He probably will stay once they start getting rid of more people.
Mhm.
So, this is a chance for him, and I wish him luck.
Yeah, he'll get his chance, and I know that you brought up that point of he probably had his chance this season, playing so many games, and compared to previous seasons, right? So, that was the part where I was going to be like, you had your chance at least this season,
Yeah.
but albeit